Welcome to the premier edition of D9 Football Focus. I'm Duber, a.k.a. Bob Perana. Well, I'm sure we'll tell the story how I got Duber somewhere along the line. And with me is the former head football coach of the Port Allegany Gators and 1998 Johnsonburg graduate, Justin Bienkowski. And my friend, it is a thrill to be talking with you.
Hey, man, the fact that we're going to be able to sit down and talk about history, about District 9 football, about what these coaches that I am fortunate enough to build a relationship with, and, man, it's exciting. As we're going to talk about the history of football around here, I've learned through, I've been singularly focused with Port Allegany forever, but I learned how much these coaches have energy and pride and are ready to rock and roll with this football season. So this is going to be a good time, man, because where else you get to spread positive vibes than you, Good Egg?
Well, I appreciate that, my friend. And we're going to start out with our mission is really just to promote the positivity that District 9 football brings. Players, coaches, fans, and really, Justin, we all know firsthand what it can do for a community.
No doubt. Love high school wrestling and love high school basketball and high school baseball and high school softball and all that stuff. But from my experiences in Class A and small town football, nothing gels a community together than a successful high school football team. And like you said, I was fortunate enough to experience that, and neat doesn't do it justice.
No, and it's also just, it is usually the big community event of the year. And, besides this, I'll be covering the other sports as well. But we are going to look at football. And my friend, I got to tell folks that in 1992, when I was at WLMI, Mr. Barry Morgan, what a legend, what a super guy. And I figured we're going to try something new. And we started a show called Football Focus on Thursday nights. And there was a young kid in Johnsonburg listening to us.
That is correct, my friend. Like we talked about before, Thursday nights, I can't remember the time, but you guys, you as well as Scotty McGuire, who I know to this day to be a phenomenal man, the late, great Barry Morgan, just talking about, I remember the focus was Kane, but then it was whomever Kane was playing. But I got to hear, before I knew him personally, I got to hear Bob Haskins and Carl DeFilippi and Paul Simcoe and Conrad Danielson and all those, Coach Kevin Carter, all those, what I would call legends.
Yeah.
I never in a million years thought I'd be in their shoes, trying to lead young men.
And here you are with me today. Boy, that's got to be like a dream come true.
I'm telling you what, I spoke to you about this before, man, and, being an AML fan to not even knowing how important AML was and its connection to both Port Allegany, my, current home, and Johnsonburg, my, where I grew up and all that. So we're going to talk about that history soon, but yeah, the football focus to be a part of, 2.0, with the legendary Duber Perana, man, pinch me, because this is surreal for me, for real.
Okay, real quick, I'm going to tell people how I got Duber. I was 4 years old, used to watch Romper Room. They had Doobies and Don't Bees. I called the Doobies Dubers, and my mom thus nicknamed me Duber, and I've been a Duber since I was 4 years old, and I'm going to be 64 soon, so 60 years of Duber in it, buddy. But let's cut to the chase here. And I'm looking, because I think it was 93 when, before me and Barry, it was my last season at LMI, and I used to do this magazine called Sidelines. And I'm looking, Justin, because the AML started in 86, and so this year of 93, these were the teams involved. In the East was Smithport, Port Allegany, Coudersport, Cameron County, Sheffield, Otto Eldred, and Coudersport ended up replacing Bradford Central Christian after the 1986 season. And in the West, it was Johnsburg, Ridgeway, Elk County Christian at the time.
Yeah.
Yep. Eisenhower, Kane, and Youngsville. My times have changed, but boy, they were the good old days, my friend.
I can remember we've talked about this before when we've talked earlier in my career, and, sitting at Bradford High's Parkway field of grass at the time, watching Johnsonburg, sack Jimmy Stayer. I didn't know him at the time. But when Frankie Alio sacked Jimmy Stayer, and I think Jimmy Stayer, no, I don't believe it was 86. maybe it was, but sacked him on the 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
But the year before that, Port Allegany beat Johnsburg over in Cameron County for the first one. And I've seen video of those games. And then as the AML progressed, like you said, you were out of there in 93-ish, but Elk County, Catholic now, Smethport started to establish themselves in the late 80s, early 90s. I can't wait to talk when we talk about Smethport's preview and talking to Coach Ryan Yingling, who played in the 90s, just the history there.
Yeah.
That's going to be cool. We'll talk about down the road. But then, Smethport continued to establish themselves throughout into 1990s. And then that's when you started to see an Eisenhower's run and Ridgeway. I can remember my brother's sophomore year, the late Shane Williamson was a running back for Ridgeway.
Mm-hmm.
And they were studs. That's when they had so many people on the sidelines. And then Eisenhower again, you had the Whitties, and then you had Smethport always in there in the 1990s. But to finish out the 90s, it was for me, Eisenhower and Smethport probably defined what it was. We tried to play around in Johnsburg. Ridgeway tried to play, but the 90s for me in AML football was really cool, man.
Yeah. And I've had I've found a few old radio tapes, and I played a few of them in some of those AML championship games, one of them being the Ridgeway championship over the Hubbers. And it's just so cool to hear it back then. But, man, that was big time. I think one thing that, for me, having been in the media, like when I started at Duquesne Republican in 84, it was you developed your own film. There wasn't computers. You didn't get instant gratification for a score. So you either had to listen to the radio or buy a newspaper, and it was just a different time. But man, that was the Super Bowl at the time, of course, and then the district playoffs became the big thing. But man, that AML championship game, and I think it's whatever episode I have recaps of all the games, and I might have to play a little bit of that. But being a part of that, like the first, and my little brother Dave, he played for Johnsonburg that first and second year against Port Allegany. You might be able to shed some light on some of that, but it certainly has changed, and it just blows my mind what's available today. But it kind of makes the history even, more special to me, knowing the work we had to put into it back then, Justin.
Yeah, and I'm sure, as a media person, you understand that vividly. And even as I watched the film and this is the mid to late 90s, you watched the V1 VHS tape of whatever you had of the other opponent. And now we have a mandatory film exchange, in less than 5 clicks, you can get your next 2 opponents. And that's actually the rule.
Yeah.
So just from a coach's perspective, in my time as starting out as coaching in 2004, I was often the guy that would drive to Lance's Corners to meet whichever coach from the southern part of the AML to swap DVDs.
Yeah.
And now it's we have a thing called Huddle, and you can get it within moments, and you can watch every game of every team. But to go back to your history, I think the vintage VHS and the grainy film, it takes me back to all these. Even as we continue in AML and we have into the 21st century, we have, Kerwinsville came on the map. Andy Ivanko came, pretty much dominated the run game, the definition of block down, kick out. And then, Kerwinsville, opened up a little bit to Cowdy. Cowdy became dominant with the guys that they had. And then Kane and Cameron County battled. Brockway and Port Allegany battled. And then it all came down to, Kane came about at the end, and 2016 when numbers and geography and all that enrollment, came a play to the small school. But to sum up AML football for me personally, I still think, other than the wide receivers being in a 3-point stance, I still think there's something to be said about the old AML teams. Yes, they're in regions now, but we know what they are, and there's a lot of heritage and history and pride, and the town shuts down for whatever Friday evening or Saturday afternoon game. And that's something special that we hope to talk about with these coaches, that it's not that far off from what we're describing, that history and heritage, that these coaches still get to experience, that they got to talk about when I talk to them. And Every single coach I talked to talked about the community.
Yeah.
And District 9 football is so much pride. I can't emphasize that enough, and looking forward to talk about that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it's when you talk to coaches too, kids may not know the history of what happened. I mean, gosh, you look at what was that? That was over 30 years ago. Actually 40 years ago in '86 when it started. And I'm just going to throw some names out at you. And these were in the one edition, Justin, I had the birthdays of the AML coaches. And here's who was coaching in '93 at Ridgeway: Benny Bensuti, Kevin Carter in Johnsonburg. Tim Case was at Cameron County, and I remember he was a Civil War buff, and all these little things that are coming back to me. Glenn Collins coached at Youngsville, and his two kids played. We had Corey Copley at Sheffield, Conrad Danielson at Eisenhower, of course, the one and only Carl DeFilippi in Smithport, Boyd Fitzsimmons at Otto Eldred, Bob Haskins at Port, John McDonald had taken over for Dick Smith in Kane, Joe Schlim at Elk County Christian at the time, and Paul Simcoe at Cottersport. And it's just got to be crazy kind of to hear those names again.
Man, the connections. Those are guys I listened to with you and Barry on Thursday nights on WLMI. And just going through some of the people that you just mentioned. Of course, Kevin Carter, I played for him, knew him even before I got into high school. Him and his wife and his two sons. So I played for him. He retired after my junior year. Mm-hmm. Corey Copley was my student teaching supervisor, really? Or excuse me, student teaching co-op when I was at Sheffield. And, of course, Bob Haskins, one of my near and dear friends I talk to quite regularly. He always told me with coaching, you just better make sure you keep a close circle because, there's a lot of people that want to bring you down. And I love that man to death. Boyd Fitzsimmons, anytime I see him, he's going out of his way, of course, being Otto Eldred. See him all the time. And then Paul Simcoe, I told you my part-time job, I get to, landscape part of his yard. So how it comes without District 9 AML football, those relationships, and I preach this all the time with, former assistant coaches and players, relationships are so important. That's what these coaches talked about. Can't wait to share that. But I think that's why I respect and understand coaches and their small circles and their, very, very, very focused, detail-oriented process because there's so much that could get in the way.
Yeah.
And I respect the heck out of these guys and the time that they put into it, which we'll talk about down the road. But just excited to get going, man.
Yeah, and then I'm looking too.
Man, the connections. Those are guys I listened to with you and Barry on Thursday nights on WLMI. And just going through some of the people that you just mentioned. Of course, Kevin Carter, I played for him, knew him even before I got into high school. Him and his wife and his two sons. So I played for him. He retired after my junior year. Corey Copley was my student teaching supervisor, really? Or excuse me, student teaching co-op when I was at Sheffield. And, of course, Bob Haskins, one of my near and dear friends I talk to quite regularly. He always told me with coaching, you just better make sure you keep a close circle because, there's a lot of people that want to bring you down. And I love that man to death. Boyd Fitzsimmons, anytime I see him, he's going out of his way. Of course, being Otto Eldred, see him all the time. And then Paul Simcoe, I told you my part-time job, I get to, landscape part of his yard. So how it comes without District 9 AML football, those relationships, and I preach this all the time with, former assistant coaches and players, relationships are so important. That's what these coaches talked about. Can't wait to share that. But I think that's why I respect and understand coaches and their small circles and their, very, very, very focused, detail-oriented process because there's so much that could get in the way.
Yeah.
And I respect the heck out of these guys and the time that they put into it, which we'll talk about down the road. But just excited to get going, man.
Yeah, and then I'm looking too, some of the people in the media. I remember R.L. McCrae up at Warren. Al Locker was doing games at WHKS for the Gators.
Al Locker is one of the best, man. Al Locker is a legend in Port Allegheny. Al Locker came back and did a game last year or the year before. I can't remember what it was in our playoff run, but that voice ranks up there with the Barry Morgans of the world. I feel confident saying that.
Yeah. We had John Allen at WKBI. Craig Feldbauer was at WKBI. Here's one you might remember. Paul Hemmel, WFRM.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And I had a chance. I also on this, because I had asked for predictions on things, and I had a chance to work for him a little bit in 2018 over in St. Mary's with Jim Mulcahy from the Daily Press. So, as we absorb the history of this, and when I got back into this in 2018, I believe, Justin, that was the first year the District 9 League was formed, and that was just kind of different for everybody. We had the large schools, the mediums, the small schools. That too has developed, but dang, there's been a lot of. I mean, look at the co-ops we have today.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I talk about with several coaches that have co-ops and the complexities that come with that. Look forward to talking about that, but one thing that I say is consistent amongst all the change that was AML East-West,
yeah.
AML North-South, District 9 small school, District 9 large school, District 9 regions, 3, now we have 4. But the one constant thing has been, and just as much as you relayed, Coach Simcoe, Coach Haskins, Coach Carter, Coach Danielson, all those guys, there's a crop now that I've got to know that have nothing but the best to pay it forward for District 9 and keep it strong and keep it rolling.
And that's kind of what we're here to do as well, right, my friend?
Absolutely.
So, your years of playing, so you graduated in 97.
98.
98. Yeah, I keep getting you and Rob Lawner, who will throw it there, screwed up from time to time. But even back then, Justin, the equipment and everything compared to today, it almost looks like the Stone Ages, and then take that back into the 80s. It's just incredible to me.
I just had this conversation. First and foremost, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rob Lawner, our fullback, a year older than me, just an immovable object at linebacker, and still stay in touch with him, wish him all the best with Baker Bands. And, there you go, Rob. There's my little shout out to Baker Bands. But what a phenomenal dude. But the equipment, like I had this conversation with, and maybe Rob even wore a toilet seat when I went over and visited practice with the school. And we were talking about that, bringing back the old school equipment. It's so ironic that you asked me that. Thigh pads that were about 4 inches thick. You had hip pads where the jersey got tucked into the girdle and the hip pads would stick out the sides. The spikes weighed 300 pounds. Then when they got wet, all that. But nowadays kids feel very comfortable and look good, play good, feel good. And, it's nowadays some kids look like they just have a puffy shirt on. They don't even look like they have shoulder pads on. But yeah, it's definitely different.
Look sharp and be sharp, as my dad always used to tell me.
Whatever works, man.
So what act? So, you leave Johnston, because I want to get into a little bit about, really, because we had talked about some of these relationships with people and stuff, but, what got you and what put you over that hump to get into coaching, Justin?
I think I always had a interest in athletics, of course. My mom and dad come up the other day for my daughter's birthday, and my mom always talked about the only thing I ever wanted was a ball of some sports variety, and I'd be at the playground all day, and I just enjoyed doing that. I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and I did it in student teaching in Warren Beatty Middle School when I was there. Matter of fact, one of the kids on that team is now a colleague of mine at the high school in Port Allegheny. And then I just developed, how do you get a job interview? How do you get a favor? Anything that's just about building relationships and letting people know they can trust you. So basically through a connection, I got hired at Port Allegheny in terms of the interview. Hey, this has an opening. Back then, if you got a teaching job, you were gold.
Yeah.
So I get to Port Allegheny and got to meet Mike Bodemer and Bob Haskins in the social studies department. I just realized that, to quote a colleague of mine who's now a principal administrator, you gain more respect with the whistle around your neck than you do a tie around your neck. It just got me there's more to teaching than the instruction in the classroom, even though it's important.
Yeah.
And there we go, relationships. That's why I think, dude, when I talk to all these coaches that I talk to, one of the biggest realities of it all is they are all just in my contact list through coaching.
Sure.
And without football, you don't know. You don't have that. So
Right. Yeah. And that's going to be the cool thing, getting your insights. And, in our next episodes, we're going to be going through teams and such. But, you did a little homework so I left, the broadcasting business after 93, got into the magnet business. I was in Du Bois and then I did some campgrounds. So I was gone for 20 years. So, I'm kind of glad you did a little homework here. And just as a reminder, do you have your list in front of you, Justin?
Of the AML?
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. Just to get folks, refurbished, why don't you go through that list for us?
So, you have anywhere starting in 86, but we'll go to 93, right? We talked about that stuff already.
Yeah.
But 1993, that was the Ridgeway Smethport. That's when Smethport really started establishing themselves, like the fourth year in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 94, Smethport and Ike started their rivalry. Eisenhower, I should say. 95, Eisenhower Smethport. 96, Eisenhower Smethport. 97, Eisenhower Smethport. And then you get into, Smethport starts falling off a little bit. Probably not maybe only by their standards.
Sure.
And then, like I said, you're getting into Kerwinsville's. They had Harnish brothers at running back. They played current head coach at Port Allegany, Cliff Philhart, current assistant coach Kyle Bachman. Those guys were on that Port Allegany team that Kerwinsville defeated in 2000. So, again, relationships. And then you get back into the Kerwinsville starts building after we talked about with Andy Evanko, Nick Sipes, and the Sopic brothers, one of which is the head coach at Kerwinsville now. Powder Sport starts to come alive. Coach Simcoe's kind of at the tail end of his career, and then hands it over to Kane.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Varner and Kane, and
and my nephew, just to interrupt real quick, my nephew Kevin Clear, quarterback for those Kane teams. So it's constantly, there's always a touch here. So let's go back. So we had Kane on their roll, and I hated to interrupt you, but I wanted to get that in.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, family first, right?
Well, that's what they say. Yes.
After Countersport, they had dynamic athletes there. But like I said, with Coach Simcoe's tail end, and then Coach Hathaway came in. But then you get into Kane, and Jason Varner and his guys. Zach Anderson, a quarterback, and they had all kinds of athletes around them. And then Cameron County and Jordan Crane played quarterback, and Jason Belos and all those guys. And for Gully, and then Port Allegany and Brockway went back and forth for 2-3 years in a row. Not only NML championship games, but district playoff games, and then we make the turn to the 2000 teens, and Port Allegany continues, and then it's a little bit of mix of Kane and Cameron, and again Kane ends the AML. Matter of fact, one of my years, first time I was head coach at Port Allegany was we played them 3 times in 2015. Mm-hmm. They had the Rollick twins.
Yeah.
They had Ray Mays, Keaton Roundsville. Again, guys that coach for Kane. Just talked to Ray last week. Again, just relationships. We're talking about the same old sport, just different names, different communities, ebbs and flows. It's cyclical where we're at in the world, which kind of makes it cool. It's kind of an anomaly. Once in a while you hear that one team, but for the most part, get a couple classes together and heck, you form some relationships in District 9 football. So I'm glad that we were able to start this with the history of it for sure, because it's important.
And it's a thing too where I'm just thinking back here to, again, what it took to get things going back then. And again, you didn't have all this information even with the kids. Do you think, I don't know how to say this, it's almost a thing like, information is too much out there, that some of the mystery is gone. And I think back in my day, some of the mystery was what made it a little even more special, because there was sometimes you really didn't know what to expect, and there was always that, like when Elk County Christian, when Joe Schlimm and they beat, Smethport. I mean, that's pretty big stuff,
1995.
That's huge stuff, and
I remember that. Yeah, but you're right. Like it's almost as if now you better be prepared, because you have every opportunity to be prepared.
Right.
It's dialed down to. I'm sure the coaches tomorrow morning afternoon, evening, depending on who started school, will sit down with their kids, and one of the first things some of them will look at is, you can see, okay, Bob Prana, running back, linebacker, watched 5 seconds of film.
Yeah.
Bob Prana, wide receiver, watched 2 hours of film. It's that detail oriented. So when people see these kids play football and wonder, man, why are they always in the right spot? It's because these kids and these coaches that are committed have that at their fingertips. And, again, one of the things I'll talk about when we start talking about teams and coaches is the level of preparedness, and, whether it's on their phone, it's on their iPad, it's on their computer. Again, we don't have to pass around the CD anymore. We don't have to pass around the VHS anymore. Credit to the kids. They put their time in, and coaches put their time in, and it's evolved so much. I think it's obviously for the better if you use it correctly, like anything else when it comes to technology.
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of alluding to. It's almost like you can be overkill with data and information, and it's hard to absorb. Or back then, you're watching a black and white film, even, going back even further. It's like, okay, but now I think, okay, all these tools are with you. I think it could put a little pressure on people that you are expected to be better, but hey, it still boils down to kids are kids. They're playing for fun, and I use this a lot, but isn't that what it's all about, man?
You hit the nail on the head, man. It does not matter. Some of these kids are gifted physically. Some of these kids have talents that God gave them, but they're still 14, 15, 16, 17, in some cases 18 years old.
Yeah.
And they're real. Yeah. And it's cool to see their growth. Again, one of the questions that we'll talk about with coaches is that's probably one of the primary points of defining success is watching these kids grow.
Yeah.
Watching these kids and boys become young men.
Yeah, literally. I mean, and they go their different ways, and some kids may never play sports again, but that's why we want to emphasize the positivity here, because those are days that you're going to remember as you get older. And there are life lessons there. I mean, I know that can be a bit corny, but firsthand, you're teaching life to these kids, and these kids are absorbing things. And I remember talking to Chris Dworick, and he said, it helps kids prepare for things that may happen later on in their life, like the baby's crying. You might be able to get how you held it together on the football field, to be able to do things with that. And I think that sometimes gets lost in translation.
Well, it all again, when you focus on the coaches, we'll talk about this. I don't want to be too repetitive, but we'll talk about this when we get into the coaches. But in our program, I know we've talked about it in the past with husbands, fathers, and employees. Like, that's football. Like, referees get in the way. Stud players on the other team get in the way. You still have to wake up and take care of the diaper. You still have to, you and your wife aren't getting along. You still have to show up. And you might not like your boss, but you still got to go to work and provide for your family. And all these coaches talked about that in their own intricate ways. Like you said, sometimes it's corny, sometimes it's cliche, but the players know they mean it. The coaches are invested. They do so much for these kids that have nothing to do with football. And they're special people. They put the time in. They've been committed. It doesn't start 2 weeks ago on the first day of heat. Most of these programs started in January or February, and community service and all that stuff. So really excited to talk about that on our first, I guess, football-oriented podcast.
Yeah.
Episode, my bad.
Yeah, well, we're kind of just getting everybody to know us, because I think the way things heated up after I put the post on Facebook at Duber's place that you and I were going to be doing things, it was like a wildfire, buddy, and we're going to be partnering up with some people too. That it's almost mind blowing to me. This is what I always wanted to do, and now I get to do it. And I don't care if 1, 2, 3 people are listening. But the bottom line is, I just want to make sure these kids are promoted. And again, I'll be doing that with all the sports and just the communities, because dang, it's kind of what we got, man. Sometimes it's like going back to the old days. It is what we have, let's take pride in it. And I don't care if you're a team. I mean, I remember going to Sheffield and they were having tough times, but man, on Saturdays, what a beautiful field, and you'd see the place packed. And it's just magic to a point, Justin.
Well, two things. Number one, I'm going to say to you, you're dumbfounded and mind boggled by the amount of hits and views and likes and all that you got. That's because of the way you treat people, pal. There's a reason why people are going to want to listen to this. You promote positivity. You give good vibes. You're a hell of a good egg. Two, I will say 100%. And I've seen really successful teams and really unsuccessful teams and wins and loss record, but that community, man, does not waver. You're always going to have your outliers and your bleacher creatures and all those. You're always going to have that because people need to find something to gripe about. But the positivity and the encouragement and the, there's something to be said. I don't care if it's 1950 and the sock hop days.
Yeah.
It's 1960 and counterculture starting, or it's 1970 and hippies, and 1980 and rock, and 1990 and grunge. I don't care.
Right.
Wearing a jersey down the hallway is important. I don't care if you play football or whatever other sport you play, because they all do it. That's cool, and that's still cool.
Yeah.
And that, bonfires and homecoming and parades, that's still cool. And I can't even wait till we get to homecoming season. I think maybe we'll show up at a parade somewhere. But that's the stuff I can't wait to talk about. That's the stuff that's cool. And it's good to do it with a good dude like yourself, and looking forward to a nice 26 season, man.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to keep getting into history with each episodes and stuff, but we're a half hour in here in episode 1. I think we're going to call episode 1 now. And episode 2, we're going to be talking about a couple teams, Justin, because you have been in touch with the coaches. We're going to touch on Port, Ridgeway, St. Mary's, and Kane. And so you get yourself prepared, because we're recording a couple episodes here. But like I said, we're just getting the fire started. And like I said, we will be posting. We could have 2-3 episodes a day on. The big thing is we just want to captivate the interest and promote this stuff. And you don't know how good it makes me to feel that you're on board, bud.
Hey, man, and it's always talked about, like, if it's going to help kids, promote coaches, promote people, positivity, go District 9, all the cool, maybe in your bigger districts, you lose focus, it becomes wins and loss oriented, it becomes scholarship, it becomes NIL, but District 9 still has like I talked about a couple minutes ago, it still has the old school football approach, power I, spread, wing T, 4-3, 5-2, 6-2, I don't care what you want to call it. It's still football where towns love their football and respect it.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is, again, with that community involvement, it allows for other things to be displayed from the community where you can help people out and things like that. And, again, a magical thing with high school football.
Facts, my friend.
So we're going to wrap up episode 1, and we're going to come back with episode 2. And again, there will be a playlist on the YouTube channel, Duber's Place, folks, where you can just, follow these all along. And again, through some partnerships, I think we're going to have some eyes and ears on us, Justin. And I'm excited. I know you are. And looking forward to our next episode, bud.
Nothing but love for District 9.
And I do have to add, remember, folks, be kind. Do your best to make it.